Hello, I am Mamadou Mboj and welcome to the Viewpoint. In February this year, MOPSI, the Minister of Basic and Secondary Education, announced that it had developed a new curriculum, a competence-based curriculum which would include civic education. And that is going to be our topic for discussion today on the Viewpoint. And the discussions would also revolve around the content, if you like, of a book. It's called Right Way to Civic Education, National Values Education for Secondary Schools and Colleges. It's got, well, when you read the book, you'll get the theories, the lessons, and it's got objective questions and answers written by Ihiji, I hope that I'm pronouncing this one well, Ihiji Ifeanyi Jr. I'm not sure how well I've done there. Apparently, this is part of a series of what they call Right Way Senior Secondary Series. When you go to the back, the blurb, they've covered so many different topics: marketing, economics, commerce, government, animal husbandry, you name it, about 20. Well, it's a 174-page book, 42 chapters. Let me just give you a flavor of what is dealt with in this book. You'll have Introduction to Civic Education, National Values. You move on to have the Constitution, Democracy, Citizenship, Rights and Duties, Human Rights, Respect for Rules and Regulations. You have all sorts. Even finally, Chapter 42, Managing and Resolving Conflicts. This is going to be the topic for discussion today. And who better, of course, to have as my guests than these two gentlemen, in many ways. On my right, I've got the Director of Curriculum Research, Evaluation and Development, the Director of the Directorate of the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education, Mr. Mamadou Jeng, on my right. And on my left, I've got Imam K. Njai, who is the Desk Officer of Civic Education. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Mr.
That's
Boyd.
it. I had to go through it because I can't interview without going through it. It was fantastic. And afterwards, you play games, you read it all, and then with the questions and answers. That was fun. Yeah. I enjoyed that. Can you remember? We're aging now. But I have to start with this. When I notice something, I'm not sure. I'll make a comment and will invite also your comments there. With this book, sort of trying to teach me civic education. In fact, on the cover, it's got National Values Education. But again, I open it, I see here the president's picture, President Anna Mubarak. It's a very nice picture indeed. That's not the problem, I like it. But the idea, because any politician, on the national scene, you're merely ephemeral. You move on. It is the state that remains. So one wondered, why not use national symbols? In fact, when you read this book, they talk about national symbols, be it the national anthem or the flag, or even the coat of arms. Why not use a proper national symbol rather than using the president, which sort of tinges it with a party political element? Sir, Mr. Jang, what would be your response to that?
Well, I agree with you that instructional material especially, because this is curriculum materials that are actually materials that you use to teach students about concepts. And in this particular case, we're talking about civic education. And you want to avoid, as much as possible, having individuals, especially if they are attributed to politics, because like you rightly mentioned, people come and go. In the political stage is there for people who are currently in government, and if they are no longer in government, whoever else come would want to have maybe their pictures. And we have experienced this in the past in some of our social studies books where you mention people based on the fact that they are associated with politics. And the fact that each one that comes in would want to have their pictures in becomes a problem. But the right way to civic education is not the only civic education book we have for that level. We have two. The other one is called Guide to Success, and we are very much aware of national symbols.
Absolutely.
And they are
We'll
clearly,
get into that. We'll get into the details.
Right.
I've got here the desk officer. Just tell us, what does that mean? Desk officer, civic education, what does it mean?
Thank you very much, Mr.
Imam Kenjai,
yes, thank you very much. Well, that's my name, Imam Kenjai.
Yes.
I'm the desk officer for civic education. By this, I am in charge of designing and developing the civic education material for our school system, from the lower to senior secondary school.
Absolutely, interesting. So how would your response be to the point I just put to the director of curriculum? Well,
you're very right. This is a national subject, and the material, like my director has rightly said, is a public document. It is an instructional material, and is everybody, irrespective of your political affiliation, interact with this material. Well, we entirely agree with you that instead of a picture of an individual, it is better that we have national symbol. But obviously we have national symbols in there, but like the cover page, we entirely agree with you.
Thank you very much. Now let's sink our teeth into our subject, civic education. I mean, on the surface, you think that you know what it means, but it was when I read this book, I thought, ooh, this is so broad. I had not realized really how cross-cutting, as they call it, this concept is. Who's going to lead? I know you're the desk officer.
Yeah, I mean,
civic education, really.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why for anybody to believe that this subject is only relevant for a group and not for everybody is making a serious mistake. Because if you really understand what civic education is, it's a subject that teaches cross-cutting issues. And one main emphasis we have made in these reforms that we are doing on the curriculum is to look at how we emphasize on competency development, how we emphasize on values, especially national values and cultural, heritage. This is given prominence in these reforms that we are doing. You want to have scientists, engineers, you want to have lawyers, you want to have people who specialize in various pathways. But yes, these are people also who need to know their rights and responsibilities and duties. Duties to communities, duty to the nation. And then these are cross-cutting issues that you cannot capture in just one specific pathway. The scientist needs to know what is expected of him. For example, we had a case recently in the Gambia of a nurse who was accused of slapping a patient. This is somebody who is probably highly trained in that field, but is that the kind of expectation we have as a nation of an individual who claims to be a professional? So this is why civic education, as part of the career subjects that we believe we can properly, teach the values, the good attributes of a citizen, so that they know, yes, they can claim their rights, but yes, we expect also that they provide, responsible behaviors, that they are, aware of issues around their duties and responsibilities. If you look at the cross-cutting issues around the subject, we also know that issues around, traffic accident, human trafficking are emerging issues that need to be addressed. How do you address this? This is why civic education is being considered as an important the inclusion into the curriculum.
Yes, and you mentioned the road traffic accidents. When you see how we behave towards one another, the lack of courtesy, as it were, in the end. That's how we're going to put it. Is this what? A failure of civic education in the past? That's what we are suffering today, because we complain about it all the time. Yes. So it means that there's been some kind of failure in the past. What do you think? A failure of civic education?
Well, like my director said, civic education simply means citizenship education. Virtually everybody is a citizen, whether a citizen of Gambia or any other nation, but we're all citizens. So there is a need to educate citizens of their citizenship. They need to know the institutions, the society itself, the institutions, values, norms, and then a host of other issues like you've just mentioned. Well, civic education, we've been told that it used to be taught in schools. We've just had it. Well, but it is reintroduced in the school system, and probably out of the public outcry that there's a need for the introduction of civic education. We have different speciality. We need engineers, very well, nobody disputes that. We need scientists, we need medical doctors, highly qualified doctors, for that matter. But again, after all, they're coming back to serve the society. When you're preparing these people, we need to produce citizens of impeccable character so that they're able to deliver to expectations. A corrupt-free society that we want to create, and one way of creating this is through the introduction of subjects like civic education. So this is the reason, I believe, for the introduction of civic education.
That's it. But let me ask you this. In preparing and designing something like civic education curriculum, is there a kind of common prospectus? Because I was Googling around everywhere in the US, everywhere, they all have these courses called civic education. So how do you determine what to put in it? Because every society is different, isn't it? Is there a template that we follow, or there are certain factors that you put into account in designing a civic education curriculum? What did you do in the design of it?
Well, first of all, we need to know, like you said, societies are different, countries are different, and we have different values. Okay? First of all, we definitely conducted a survey, not in-depth survey, but a mini survey, and then tried to factor out some of the issues that we face in this country, ranging from political, economic, social, and then the list goes on. So it is from this research that we came up with the theme. We used thematic approach. We came up with theme that we think need to be addressed. So that is how we were able to select themes. I don't know whether you have some other questions, but civic education, we divided into 3 different sections. Yeah. And the first section, we call it national values, the discipline, rights, and obligations. Then section B is governmental system and processes. And then section C, we have emerging issues. So this is how we divide the subject into. So we have 3 different sections. Probably we'll go into...
We will indeed. Especially you've mentioned that national values. Very interesting. It segues into my next question. And here I need the book. Here talking about national consciousness, national identity. I think that's the base, isn't it? Let's go to page 33. There's something that I need to quote from there. Meaning of national identity. This is a person's pride and sense of belonging to a state or country. They are the things that are symbolic to a person and the nation, which stand them out and differentiate them from others. National identity connects all citizens together as they share one feeling towards the nation. And maybe that's where the issue is. It is assumed that there are certain values that we share. I used to believe that when I was at high school. Now I'm not so sure. Because really, Mr. Jack, if I'm going to sort of try to teach civic education, there are certain assumptions.
Yeah.
Surely, the assumption of the idea of the civic existing, which I want to teach.
Yeah.
Are we right in that? Do we really share something called national values? For instance, when you look at politics, you know, from what we've seen since independence, now we're 58 years old as a country, yes? The politician who comes, suddenly you get your own clique, be it your ethnic group, that's an identity that's eating into the national one so much. Before long, you're forming these sub-identities, as it were, and you would go on to plunder, to use the resources for your own benefit and your people. Do we truly have national values?
Well, I believe we have. Okay. What you have just described is when people fail to follow the ideal principles and values that we share. In civic education, like the earlier question, do we have frames that we follow? Yes, we do. For example, some of the major concepts around civic education, democracy, human rights, these are general standards, international standards that no matter which context you operate from, the reference is almost similar. But then apart from those general concepts and standards, you are looking at country-specific values. And when you talk about the values, of course, when people operate within the ideal values, we will not have a situation like that. We all want to live in peaceful coexistence, no matter which political party we belong to, which ideology we belong to, which religion we belong to. Like the Gambia, we are known for coexistence, peaceful coexistence. And that means those are values that needs to be promoted. How do we promote coexistence peacefully? How do we, negotiate? Even if we have different divergent views on issues related to politics or to religion or to whatever, we still have to understand that as a country, we have been living peacefully together, despite our divergent views on politics and religion. This is one fundamental thing as a value that we want to nurture and promote. How do you do that? You have to respect that Mr. Mboj has right to his views, even if his views are different from my own.
The tolerance element.
The tolerance.
We'll come to how we teach civic education. But first here, and following on, you've mentioned something very interesting there, and I will invite you in to contribute to my previous question, and then you follow it up. You said the scenario I gave you said it will come about when people fail to follow. Yeah. It's a very interesting one. You see, how would you respond to this? And I want you to. When you have a huge number, I think, failing to follow, then that is very interesting. Does it point to something larger than the individual? Yep. Am I talking about perhaps a cultural base, as it were, that sort of thing? If I have a few, I said, okay, that's an aberration. Generally, we are okay. But it's the other way around. Where are the failures? From when I'm at home, you're being taught. That's part of civic education, really. You can't do this, you can't do that. You have to be nice. When I send you to the shop, I give you money, you have to be honest. The basic values are there. Where is the failure? What is going on here? Because we are told we were being taught this. When we were at school, we were being taught physics. What is going on? In spite of the best efforts, a lot of people will say that we haven't made much headway in certain areas, which is making organization difficult, the all-pervasive corruption, the disorganization. There are all sorts of things wrong. What's going on? Well, how would you analyze it? How would you characterize it? Because we need this, don't we, to know then what to do. What is your take there?
Well, that's very right. I think that is one thing that we want to address. What we learn most of the time, we learned certain concept on the street. You know, there's a need to formalize that. Of course, home is the first school from our mothers, our parents, tell us the do's and don'ts, what you can do and what you cannot do. But it goes to a point that now virtually everybody is going a different direction. It means there's a problem somewhere, and that problem needs to be addressed. In addressing this is why we have decided to come up with this. So how do we do that? Is teaching values, your previous question, values, whether there's common value that we share. Yes, of course. There might be slight differences, but there are values that we definitely need to learn. Values like respect, tolerance. You've talked about tolerance. You also have honesty, and I think that is the basis for everything. We have to be honest. That is a value that we need to inculcate in our students. Yes, of course, yes. Media campaign and other things are very helpful. Okay. But if we really want to get the society that we need, the type of Gambia that we need, it is better we start from the grassroots. And this is our target. From the, we have a common phrase that we say, we say catch them young. Yes. It is from this level that we are able to nurture good values. And they will grow with these values to become the responsible citizens in this country, and they will be managing position, whether now or later. There will be directors, there will be permanent secretaries, there will be presidents, ministers, and we want to have citizens. Of course, yes, it's difficult to eliminate corruption completely.
And you can even be a driver,
obviously,
or what we used to call a watchman. Yet that integrity, isn't it? That self-respect, that self-government, that's really what we want to teach.
That is it.
Throughout, it doesn't matter who you are, as long as you're a human being.
Exactly.
That is that basic respect, isn't it?
That is it. So they need to grow with this. We all need to do that, and we are doing our best. But like I said, it might be difficult to change a grown-up somebody. But from the word go, if we start nurturing these values, positive attitudes, responsibility, they have to assume their responsibility from cradle. If they grow with that, probably by the time they demand the position, who will not talk about some of these things that you've said it. Corruption is very pervasive, very rife. Okay, not only that, intolerance. People are very impatient now. Okay, insult everywhere, social media, and so we definitely need to address this. And then the best place to start it is from when we are young.
That's it. And here, when we say corruption, we here, let's be clear, we are not any more corrupt in many ways than any other people. That's not the thing. It's simply a certain idea, a certain perspective between individuals, the citizens, and the state. We tend to regard the state as something where I should feather my nest. Let us be honest. It is really that basic attitude that one wants to challenge in many ways. Exactly. But here, Mr. Jeng, how do you teach it? Because it got me thinking while I was reading this, how to teach civic education, because it got me thinking. Is it about receiving information? Here with the theories, I got lots of information on which I was tested, or something else, because this thing has to do with values and norms. Is it about trying to reorient the patterns of thinking to inculcate that civic mindedness, which is a much slower journey? What do you think about the theories, the ideas that we get, and yet you know that you really want to influence habits, which is very different, isn't it?
I'm happy you asked that question, because quite often when you talk about implementing instructional material or curriculum, people quite often just look at the school, the four corners of the classroom, that teacher, not knowing that all of us are supposed to be implementers of that curriculum. As a parent, if we are talking to the children in school, that be honest, don't lie. And just when they are out of that classroom, they meet up with an elderly person who just lie to them, play games that really are certainly opposite what they are being taught in class, the kids will get kind of confused. And that is why for reorientation, it's not only the students, but we're talking about the general public. We're teaching these values. Let's practice them. Let's practice them in school as teachers, as school administrators, as designers of the curriculum. But let's practice what we're telling these students also as parents. Therefore, I believe we are embarked on a journey. The last time I came here, I mentioned this. A long journey that would require everybody to play their parts if we want to be successful as a country, if we want to reorientate the minds, and if we want to make sure that these values that we are teaching, which is the call, this is a national call. Because quite often you hear the elderly people, because they talk in parables. Meaning, not that they do not know the concepts of math, science, but their behavior shows that, something is lacking. What is lacking is those values. But how can we teach these values, practice these values? It means more than just the classroom. It means more than just the school environment, but it means the home. It is wrong to lie to your children, because if you do, you are reinforcing. You are telling them, it's good to lie. Then if you come to class and we are teaching you to be honest, don't lie, you will not take us seriously, because the general environment at home and the public there is not a crime. It's frequently being, you hear people say one thing and they do the opposite. So I'm calling on all of us, including the journalists, let's all embark on this reorientation of our practices and mind.
And here I'll ask you this, but just an anecdote here. When we were younger, you remember maybe a visitor might come and visit our aunt, and the aunt will say, "Tell this person I'm not around." I'm like, as a grown-up, I'm like, you're really teaching me to lie. but it's so innocent. The way they put it, it's so innocent.
Right.
Do we need a parents' curriculum? This is for people who can go to school, who can read. A lot of people really cannot read. What is civic education? What is your engagement like with parents, people who can't read, the grassroots engagement about the concepts we are talking about?
Well, before coming there,
the
previous question, how do we teach civic education?
That's it, how do we teach it? Yeah.
And I think that is very, very important.
Yes.
Well, if you look at the basis for the curriculum reform is to shift away from the content knowledge to inculcation of or promotion of values, attitudes, and competencies. So obviously, we do not teach our students just to memorize this concept in the book. No. We are moving away from that. Of course, yes, concept building is very important, but how do they bring, or how do we all bring this into our life, our daily life? So this is our target, and like my director said, it is everybody's business. It's not only that teacher teaching in the classroom. It's not only curriculum officers. It's everybody, from home to the larger society, to everybody. And I think through this, we'll be able to get where we want to go. And whether we have a curriculum for parents
or guardians.
You want to have directly.
Yeah, I mean, actually, We are developing what we call implementation guide of the curriculum. And the implementation guide is specifying the roles of each of those stakeholders. The role that we expect parents to play, because sometimes, I mean, let's be fair with them as well. We need to tell them, we need to help them understand what we expect them to do at home to support their kids' learning. For example, you have students in school only for 5 hours or not more. The rest of the day, these children are at home with their parents or in the general community. And how do you guide those people to use this precious time that these kids have at home? How do you guide those people to know that when you want the students to practice what they learn, that which is now the learning situation? In this reform that we are doing, we are emphasizing competency-based development. And what that means is the concept you're learning, we want to give you a situation where you practice it. It's not just learning to remember. I learned to cram 10 years ago, 50 years ago, just for the purpose of examination. Yes, but have you developed the right competencies and skills so that the concept you learn in this subject or this learning area, you're able to apply it during the learning process so that it become part of you.
Interesting one there, the competency-based element. We'll come back to that. Well, we need to take a short break now. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
As the fastest growing GSM company in the Gambia, QCell has the widest 4G plus coverage in the country, 3 times faster internet speed than our competitors. So switch now and dial *335# and enjoy what true 4G feels like. QCell, the Gambia's trusted network.
Hello, welcome back to the program. This is the Viewpoint. Today I've got Mr. Mamadou Jeng, who is the Director of Curriculum Research, Evaluation and Development, the Directorate at the Ministry of Basic Education, Basic and Secondary Education. And I've got also Mr. Imam K. Njai, who is the Desk Officer of the Civic Education. And this is really what we're talking about today, civic education. How do you teach citizenship? It's from the word civic, from civis, ancient world, meaning citizenship. Yes, just before we went on break, we were talking about competency-based sort of education, as it were. This word competency is a very tricky one. I had reason to go into some education, was running a tertiary institute, and the 3 elements of competence, I was told: the knowledge, the skills, and the attitudes, as it were. Let's go into what we really mean by competency-based. And the other one, what do you contrast it with?
Yeah, I mean, the content base was mainly focusing on that knowledge. The attitude and values were not given much focus. But also the learning situation was only focusing on how much you're able to know, how much you're able to cram that content for the purpose of examination. So that during exams, as much as you can regurgitate what you cram and have A's and B's and series of impressive results, you're good to go. But have you developed the real competencies to apply what you learn in that particular subject? And this is evidently clear from feedback we're getting from employers, from feedback we are getting from tertiary institutions where some of these students who have series of very impressive results, give them a simple task, they are not able to apply. They are not able to impress you despite their series of impressive results. What has gone wrong? It means during the learning process, they were not giving opportunities, in realistic learning situation to apply these concepts so that when you learn by doing and when you learn by seeing, the likelihood that you will develop the competencies and you can always reapply is higher than when you just learn to cram.
So there you've just touched on the soft skills and the hard skills.
Exactly.
You're a brilliant engineer,
Exactly.
but what a terrible employee.
Exactly.
that sort of thing.
Exactly. That sort of thing. But also the fact that it's easier to develop memory kind of questions in that kind of education system. And it's much more difficult to design a realistic task to assess attitudes and values. This was why one of these emphasis we are making in these reforms to say, let's bring back, let's emphasize values, attitudes. Knowledge is, nobody can question the importance of knowledge. So you have those three components, but how do you balance your learning? How do you balance your task in the learning process to ensure that all these are well captured, but all these are practiced in meaningful ways?
Yes,
So that the learner is not just learning dry concept, but they are learning through realistic learning situation that will bring their home experience into the learning process.
And that's
This is
it.
what it means.
So when I put these two together, I'll call it what? Civic competence. You don't usually see them sort of put together like that, but this is the key. The civic competence, not just knowing the knowledge part, as it were, but also
Acquire skills.
critical thinking,
Exactly.
application to real life situations.
Yep.
That's right.
Expound on that a bit.
Well, that is
the
very
civic
right.
competence we're talking about here. Yes.
Exactly. Well, you rightly said that is the emphasis, and that is not only for civic education, but it cut across. And we have identified competency. We call them cross-curricular or core competencies that run across all subjects. And we must, of course, marks are very important. Passing with flying colors is very, very important. But we emphasize too much, or we put so much emphasis on the mark we score. Okay. Now, assessment, it means if we really want to develop these competencies as we planned, it means everything has to change. Instruction, the way we give our instruction, teaching and learning in the classroom, how we assess, evaluation, all those things have to change. Meaning assessment is no longer going to be end of term or end of academic year or terminal exams, but that is what we call the formative assessment and summative assessment. There you assess your learners along the way as you teach them, as they learn, you assess their performance, and not only on their content knowledge, but even how they apply this content knowledge, and how do they behave, what is their attitude toward issues. So you assess that through learning process. So you don't have to teach them, at the end you assess them. As you are teaching, you're assessing them. Something you have mentioned earlier, that if I tell you that this is not right, well, you must see me desist from doing that. If this is good, I should be doing that. But if I said this is not right, but I do that every day, it doesn't make sense. And you're not even teaching. I think education psychologists believe that, or argue that children learn more by observation than instruction. Before you tell a child that do this is good, let him or her see you do. So obviously, they learn faster. And it's through this application of these skills and also the demonstration of values that we'll be able to get the type of competencies that we really want to bring back. I know it used to be there. Well, probably for one reason or the other, these two aspects, that is the competency, the skill aspect, and then the attitude aspects gradually fade away. But we tend to bring it back. And how do we bring it back? Well, bring them back is through this reform, meaning we have to definitely balance all the three. When we are teaching, we teach them, not only giving them instruction, but also doing it, allowing them to demonstrate it in the classroom and then even outside the classroom, and also observe them. We must be observing them and also correcting them along the way, and then correct ourselves as well.
And that's the key, isn't it? Yeah. In order to avoid the inconsistency
exactly.
when they go home the streets.
Exactly.
So you have to attack this from different angles, perhaps simultaneously.
Yeah. Exactly. That is why, as part of the plan for implementation of this new curriculum, we have a plan of activities that would engage the general public in terms of sensitizing them on what we expect their roles to change in the helping implement these curriculum materials. The teachers will train them, the schools will orient them, because at the level of the school you have administrators who may not be in the classroom to teach, but they should be observing teaching and learning. So you need to tell them, you need to orientate them on what the reform is and how we expect them to support the implementation. But, we have not started actually all these engagements that I mentioned to you. We know for sure that this is urgent to be implemented, and the senior secondary school has some background that they can, leverage on and start something. But at the level of basic education, which is from ECD to grade 9, the materials are still there. We have not started introducing them. But part of the package for that proper, implementation would require training, orientation, and sensitization of the public. Like I mentioned to you, every stakeholder, for us as an office, we see them as important stakeholders that need to play their part in this.
Absolutely. And often we talk about civic education, its significance, particularly in the context of a democracy.
Yep.
Would you like to take that one up? The connection between civic education, how significant it is to a democratic state.
Well, I think that is even the basis for civic education. Yes. That is, you want to motivate citizens to participate in democratic processes, both at the local and national level. So there is a huge link, a very strong link between the two. When they know their rights and their duties, their obligation to the society, to the state, obviously they will participate. And participation is very, very important. Civic education encourages them to take their rightful position in running the state and even in their community. In fact, that is why we have a theme that deals with democracy and democratic processes, and even elections. We have all those things there, that they have a duty. They have a duty to participate in those decision-making election. I don't even see election as a right. I think it is a duty. And not only election, in any form of any democratic process, everybody has to participate. So when we teach them their rights, their duties, and their obligations, we are encouraging them to, because if you respect somebody's right, you protect his right, you definitely encourage him or her to perform his duty. Mm-hmm. And that is where that is the reason we introduce these themes. And for your information, in the second section is where we capture all this. That is the section B, where we have governmental processes, and we talked about constitution, we talked about rule of law, democracy, rule of law, and even the constitutionalism. That is to help them understand that, hey, we have a stake in whatever is happening, because decision that is made affects you either directly or indirectly. So why do I have to stay? I have to be part of the decision-making process.
Absolutely.
That is it.
Same question, but I will angle it a bit. I do talk to people sometimes, and they tell me, oh, politics is so rotten here, and that sort of talk. So anybody who wants to go into politics, they will try to discourage you. Why do you want to get into that? But then, so you see, they surrender it.
Yeah.
They abandon it.
Yeah.
So how would civic education sort of deal with that? Because my reasoning is this. Okay, you tell me that politics is rotten. I agree. So what next? How do I deal with it? Do I surrender to it? But then I will condemn myself to a lifetime of rottenness.
Yeah.
Isn't it? That's the logic.
As a human
you
being,
must go in. You must do something about
every
it.
human being is a political being. So
Absolutely.
obviously, I would rather we reorientate people and taking this initiative to guide them young, so that people really need to know what the rights, whatever rights they are claiming, what they are, what the responsibilities are, what the duties are. And I think this is very critical in every society, every nation, for people to be properly orientated on all this, so that they can understand. You cannot sit down there, fail to participate in the political processes, and have the guts to condemn the decision that those leaders, those elected people, but what has stopped you from participating in selecting, electing those leaders? If you know that you are failing in that responsibility, which is a duty, like he said, we've talked about, voter apathy in the recent elections.
Local election.
And these are the same people who have failed to go and vote will come back to condemn X and Y and this political party or that political party. On what moral grounds can they condemn people who are elected if they fail to participate in that process? But also, this is also coming, I think, at the right time, because we are talking about the new Gambia.
Yeah.
And people are very excited about discourse around democracy. And to some extent, a lot of people do not even understand what these concepts of democracy they're talking about. Because if you are claiming your right, but don't also fail to understand that the person next door to you, the person next sitting to you, has also rights. But when we are claiming our rights, it appears in some cases that we forget that other people also have rights. So how do we ensure that people are taught about these rights and responsibilities, about citizenship, about democracy, about participation, about their duties as citizens, so that they participate effectively in nation building?
Absolutely.
This is why we believe this is something that is urgent.
Yep.
If anything else, we need engineers, we need scientists, but we need scientists who are civic. We need engineers who are civic oriented. We need lawyers who are civic oriented, so that they know that is a profession that you want to pursue, but pursue it in a civic oriented mind.
Absolutely. The new Gambia, I think, is really the new African project. When we had independence, the people like Cabrals and this sort of thing. And to my mind, something very interesting that I've read somewhere, that really it is through social engagement. Perhaps first you are a minority, but sooner or later, through discussion in a democracy, you might form a majority. That is really where social change lies. Even for such we all want social change, but this is it. Paradoxically, we are not getting involved, engaged, But without it, we're not going to get it.
Exactly.
We are in a bind. Take me through that.
Well,
social change and the civic engagement. That's really the heart of democracy.
Well, that is why it is said that if you don't want to be ruled by fools, when the fool call, just go and answer. So participation is key. In whatever little way you want to participate, it is better you do it. If you do not participate, you cannot make any meaningful change. If the society is rotten, politics is bad. Okay, politicians are liars or politics is dirty. So you don't want to participate in political processes. And that's decision making. Obviously, somebody, somewhere will be there. If you know you can do it, you have the skills, you have the knowledge, you have the attitude to do that. It is better that you participate in the, like we said, from minority. You go there, gradually you will be able to make a lot of reforms, and eventually you get the type of society you want. Social change cannot come without participation. The little knowledge you have, the little skill you have, the little values that you have, try to inject it in the society.
Absolutely.
In whatever form you can do. But if you just want to stay away from everything and you just want to be there to criticize, criticism, of course, yes, is very important. Sometimes it changes. But how about if you participate in the process itself? I think that is more meaningful than sitting at your corner, pointing fingers at everybody, condemning everybody's action when you do not do anything. And I think it is better to do it and do it wrongly than not doing it at all.
Not doing anything at all. But this is it, isn't it? This is really what we have to we confront here. You do hear a lot of people blaming leaders. We used to do that when we were younger, but now we're a bit grown up. Then you begin to realize that, oh my God, you, the person blaming, if I were to put you in position, it would be exactly like that. You have the same values.
They're even worse.
Extraordinary. they're even worse. Yeah. So this is really the situation, yeah? The change that we seek, we have to be it. That's why we keep on complaining all the time. We are saying one thing, doing quite another.
You know, what I've seen is we are struggling a lot with mopping up. And believe me, it's much more cost-effective to build the character of the young than trying to build the broken old men like you and I. And I always tell my colleagues in the development platforms that let's catch them young. You know, however small you're able to inject in that young mind to believe that this is the right way, they are likely to pick it. Not if they do not pick everything, they would pick, you know, at least little bits that they can carry on with life. But someone who is already grown to believe and has been practicing and has seen this practice widely around them, you will do your very best to orientate. In fact, when sometimes you begin to orientate them and think you are changing, you're wasting your time.
Definitely.
Because they don't believe in anything that you say. Let's catch them young. Our problem as a developing country in Africa overall is that we're not making a lot of efforts to bring these changes where we can make greater impact.
Absolutely.
Bring those reorientation, bring those changes in values, in attitudes when they are young. Catch them young.
Catch them young. We've really come to the end, sort of maybe you have 30 seconds. Of course, the teachers. When I looked at it, I said, who would be the teachers? The idea of teaching, one expects that you're training the teachers, you're having a thought, the training of teachers themselves. How would you respond to that?
Well, that is very important. Civic education is new, and Gambia College or University of Gambia does not train teachers to teach civic education. We know other subjects, yes, they are trained to teach those subjects, but civic education we don't. So our plan is to train teachers. Currently, schools rely on the government and the history teachers to teach the subject, but we're also doing our very best to try to help train the in-service. But also, it is also in our thought that we need to work with the relevant partners to have it at the Gambia College and even the training, teacher training institutions, so that teachers will be trained purely to teach civic education.
Thank you very much. You've really answered my question there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was quite enlightening. it was fantastic there. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
To our viewers, let me just give you a piece of history here. The original use of the word civic, really, in ancient Rome, well, it was translated as corona civica. They had this wreath of garland of oak trees, and guess who they gave it to? A person who saved a fellow citizen's life. Extraordinary. That's really what it means. Thank you very much. Until next time, I am Mamadou Mbodj.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mbodj.